Cannabis changed my life, and it can change your life too. If you struggle with sleep, you deal with pain or anxiety, there's so many things that the miracle plant that is cannabis can help you with. And today I'm talking with someone who knows this very well. He is Joe Sheehey, the founder of Cured Nutrition, formerly a NASA contributing aerospace engineer. And today we're talking about why the cannabinoids, CBD, CBN, and THC in very small doses specifically have such a transformative effect on the human body. I'm going to share my story of how at the most painful moment of my life, when a nurse accidentally injected chemotherapy into my nerve, aiming for my spine, missed the spine, and I went through 11 days of horrific migraines, how a tiny bit of cannabis completely eliminated my pain, gave me my appetite back, and set me on a road to recovery. Also, my grandmother, why she is now using cannabis, because I convinced her that the stigmas attached with marijuana from the old days do not apply to the reality of what research has proven the cannabis plant can do for human beings, for all of us. So dive in today. If you're cannabis curious, or you think it's bad because you grew up in the 80s and you were told it was a drug and whatever other beliefs were established at some point in your life, I think today you will find very, very interesting and informative and helpful on your health journey. Here we go. Joe, what's up, brother? Good to see you again, man.
I know. It's so good to be back here.
Dude, I had you on 2 years ago. It was episode, I think, 526, and we're on like 621. So it's been a couple of years, man.
I know. I feel like we just like dove right back in. I appreciate who you are and the way we connected on that first episode. And like right when we got back on, I was like, oh man, got a lot of love for Hal. Feels like a brother.
I appreciate
Even
it,
though
man.
I've only spent a little time with you.
Yeah. Well, there's those, those soul connections. I think we were like, this is an authentic human being who's doing good work in the world. And, and that's, I think that we're all on the same team if that's the case. So
100%.
So there's something that I really want to get into with what you're kind of moving into, almost into politics in a way, advocating for some changes the government's trying to make that would put your company at risk, put products that have changed my life at risk. I want to get into that, but actually, for those that don't know who you are, I want to start with your background with NASA, right? So you were an aerospace engineer who worked on NASA projects through Lockheed Martin. Yep. And now you run a plant-based wellness company based in cannabis called Cured Nutrition, which I'm a fan of. In fact, I had you sponsor my podcast now. But that's a huge leap, right? From NASA aerospace engineer to entrepreneur running your own company. How did that leap occur?
Yeah. So when I was in college, if I went back before college, I was the Lego guy, like little kid, Legos, building things. I always wanted to understand how things worked. My dad was a pilot and I had terrible vision. And I was like, oh, so my pilot aspirations are they're not going to come to fruition.
Got it.
So I'll figure out how to build things. And that's what led me down the engineering route. And I got really interested in space. And so I went to school for aerospace engineering. But like many people that go into college, like I was very lost. Yeah. I knew I was like, okay, this is where I think I want to go. And I was good at math and I was good at science. And so I was like, okay, cool. This is what I'm doing. And I got to a really dark place in college. And one night in 2012, I actually found myself on the edge of a bridge. I had climbed over a guardrail. And I went to go jump off of the bridge to end my life.
And this is at what age?
I was 20. I would have been 21.
Wow.
21. And somebody was below that bridge. He stopped me. He said, hey, can I come up there and talk to you? And he pulled me back over the guardrail after he climbed up all the rocks. And
wow.
I just completely broke down. And my girlfriend at the time was way behind me, but had caught up to me. He, Ben, who saved my life, handed me off, and my girlfriend walked me home. And when I got home, I took a handful of Xanax. And the next day I woke up in the hospital and I was under surveillance for suicide watch. And my parents came to the hospital, and I remember the doctor asking me, we're going to run some tests. Is there anything we're going to find in your system? And like the truth was they were going to find a lot. And when I said that, I saw the life just get sucked out of my parents because not only like did they almost lose their son the night before, like they saw that their son had like completely lost himself.
Wow.
I was in such a dark place. And then the weeks and months afterwards, I instantly went the traditional route. Orange bottles, white caps. There was no question. It was like, this is what you're going to take, and this is what's going to make you better. And things just got worse. And
what were you
so that
taking,
really,
by the way? Do you remember antidepressants or what was it?
both, yeah. So I was prescribed anti-anxiety medication, benzos,
Yeah.
and then after, but that was before. So I was struggling with anxiety, but I was also drinking. And if anybody knows, like, you do not want to combine those two, and that's why I blacked out consistently. And then I got put on SSRIs, antidepressants, and things just got worse. I was numb. I was disconnected. I was like, this is not the path. And so that was really what started to spark like this interest in an alternative path. But at the same time, I was trying to finish up my engineering degree and start a career. And so I was like, I gotta get my act together. And my parents said the exact same thing. They pulled me out of school, out of Boulder. I moved back home and finished my last year of college, like from their house, driving up to school, coming home. And at the same time was when I had first scored, with like the luck of God, an internship at Lockheed Martin. Wow. And I was like, okay, I like have to get my act together because I've worked so hard to get this degree, and I'm like teetering on the edge of, being alive or not. And thankfully, over the next year and a half, I found the bodybuilding and the fitness world, and I just left my friend group, and I like restarted my life, and thankfully ended up graduating and then getting a full-time job at Lockheed Martin. And then I spent 7 years at Lockheed Martin. I was working on projects contributing to, I worked on one called Maven, which was a Mars orbiter, Juno, which was a Jupiter orbiter, Insight, which was a Mars lander. And then I worked on Orion for a little bit. And my job was, I worked in a lot of mechanisms. So anything that moved on a spacecraft, legs that deployed on a lander, solar arrays that deployed and powered spacecraft to, travel to Jupiter or Mars. And I was slowly living this, like I was dying the death of like quiet desperation. Like, it was like, I worked so hard to get here, but I showed up every day and sat in my cubicle, and I looked around and I was like, I worked so hard for this. And I see my colleagues that have been there 25, 30 years, a lot of them just feel like they just kind of like gave up. It's like, this is how it is. Yeah. They were sour. And I was like, man, I don't, this doesn't feel good. Like, I'm not excited to be here every day, but this is like what I thought I was supposed to do. Yeah. And I like saw this image of like where the next 30 years could have led. And I was like, I gotta figure out something that's going to feel like I'm creating a tangible impact in this world, but then also like fueling like what is my soul, and feeling like I'm living like purposeful. Yeah. Because I tell people I work for NASA, they're like, what? I was like, yeah, it was awesome. And the missions that I worked on were incredible, but I sat in my cubicle and I worked on this little part. So I couldn't like feel the impact of that whole mission. Yeah. And, I started listening to Rogan a bunch, and I was like, okay, like what would it look like to carve my own path? And a couple years into working at Lockheed Martin, cannabis was legalized in Colorado. I remember Lockheed Martin sent out like corporate-wide communication, like, just because it's legal in Colorado, this is a federally funded company, and you cannot use this substance because you get randomly drug tested and you work for the government, essentially. Yeah. And I remember watching my colleagues' reactions to reading that email, and some being like closing their, like holding their lips, like, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to like give away if I ever used it or not, and like, what are people going to think about me? And I had used cannabis while I was in college, but I was also combining it with a bunch of different substances. Yeah. And so I'd spent several years in sobriety after, a very dark place, but I still had questions. I was like, this industry is interesting to me. And then I started seeing CBD and non-intoxicating cannabinoids that were helping people with relaxation and recovery. And I was like, sleep and pain. Yeah. And sleep. And I was like, okay. And for myself too, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a non-THC product because I know I get drug tested for THC.
Yeah.
And hopefully I don't get drug tested and for some reason they're testing for CBD now, but it started helping me with my anxiety, with my racing mind, which then helped me sleep, which then helped me recover, which then it showed up in every area of my life because I was sleeping good. Yeah. And that helped my mental health in combination with, of course, exercise and diet and everything else. But
yeah. About two of my favorite products. I've been taking these for 4 years and they are now a sponsor of the podcast. Cured Nutrition, Flow Gummies. I start every day with 2 of these. I meditate for 30 minutes without any supplements. And then I take Flow Gummies 7 days a week, almost every day. And then I go to bed with night oil. 30 minutes before bed, I take night oil and it helps me fall asleep and stay asleep. So I start my day with Flow Gummies. I end my day with night oil. If you want to implement my routine into your day with Cured Nutrition, go to curednutrition.com/Hal. Again, that's curednutrition.com/Hal and use the discount code HAL at checkout for 20% off your entire order. Flow Gummies to start the day, night oil to fall asleep. You'll feel better. You'll act better. You'll perform better. Check it out.
My mom had introduced me to Dr. Andrew Weil a couple years after I had first been prescribed antidepressants. And he was one of the original individuals who wanted to study marijuana and the medical benefits of it. Yeah. And he ran the Center for Integrative Medicine. I think it's I don't know if it's at ASU or U of A. It's in Arizona. He also started True Food Kitchen. So if you've ever been to True Food, that was Dr. Andrew Weil.
Oh, he did start True. I forgot about that. I read his book, Living Foods for Optimum Health, in my early 20s. And that totally transformed my view on, how using food as fuel and diet and all of that.
Yeah. He's so good. I think the book that my mom gave me was Spontaneous Healing.
Okay. I've read that too. Yeah.
And it was can you use high dose fish oils and vitamin D and herbs? And I was like, this is so interesting because I was quickly prescribed antidepressants and, I know I'm not alone. I know that there's this whole world of people out there that are looking for an alternative option. And so finally, 7 years into my engineering career, I had been playing around with the idea of what would it look like to start my own business. And I saw this cannabis industry coming to fruition in California and Colorado, and I had such an interest in it, but I was like, I don't know how, what am I going to do in this? I don't know. I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer and I'm very interested in the health and fitness industry. And I had started a podcast.
Okay.
Because I was like, this is a way to create a community and maybe I could become an entrepreneur outside of this, or this could lead to something. And I
what
called
was
it
your podcast.
It was called Higher Health. And what the definition was, it was not to get high, but it was really what is health at a higher level of consciousness? Because I was looking at the health and fitness industry and I was like, okay, well, all these pre-workouts and everybody on steroids. I'm like, that's not really health to me. So what's this higher consciousness or higher level of health? And I started to talk to people about cannabis on that podcast. And it was left and right. People were raising their hand. And a lot of times they wouldn't want to talk about it on the podcast, but we'll talk about it after. I was like, there's something here. There's a lot of interest, but there's also a fear of the stigma.
The stigma.
What are people going to think about me if I'm I've used cannabis and it helps me sleep? Okay, are you labeled the stoner? Are you part of Cheech and Chong culture? Are you and I was like, here it is. I need to change the face of an industry to then change the perception of who can use this product to then reach a completely different demographic. Because I saw person after person saying, yes, I'm just using this for stress relief. I'm using this for sleep. I'm using this to calm my mind. But they didn't want to tell anybody else about it. So I was like, if I can package this in a way that changes the narrative around who a user is and what the effects of cannabinoids are, then I think there's something here. And I was half 1 foot in, 1 foot out in engineering at the time. And when I look back on the time, I could recognize that my boss could tell. But at first, I was
boss what?
he could tell that
Oh,
I
he
was
could
1
tell.
foot in. He was like, I was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah.
I wasn't producing results in my engineering career like I would expect of myself. And one day my boss just completely belittled me in front of a bunch of my colleagues.
Wow.
And I went and saw an employee services therapist because I was starting to get depressed. I was like, there's like this path that I want to take. I was very interested in becoming an entrepreneur. And then there was who I really was. Like there was the path that I wanted to take, and there's who I really was. And it caused this massive dissonance. And I believe that when you live in that world of like, who are you really? Who do you show up as every day? And then if there's a gap between that and who it is you really want to be,
your soul is crying out to be. And
yes.
Yeah.
That's like this, like, I'm not yet who it is I want to be. I'm trying to portray to the outside world that I am this other person, but my actions aren't showing it.
Yeah.
And so I was
sadly,
just
so
like,
many people never have the courage to do what you're about to share, right? Which is like they live their whole life there. Like
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And so when I went and shared with my therapist, I saw this therapist one time and I was sharing it with him. Like, I had a relationship that had fallen apart. I was like not happy in my career. I had worked so hard and I was getting depressed again, but I had been depressed before. So I could like look back and say, okay, that's something's going on here. This person, I'm not who I really want to be. And I sat with him for about 30, 45 minutes and he just stopped me. He said, Joe, like, can I give you something? And I was like, yeah, like, he's like, I'm going to give this to you. I don't think you're ever going to come back as a client though. And he turned to his desk and he pulled out a card and he wrote something on it and he handed it to me. And on the back, it just said permission. And he was like, Joe, like, you're looking for permission from everybody in the outside world, but nobody's going to give it to you beside yourself. That day I left the therapist's office, put in my letter of resignation. And the next day I started Cured and I had no idea what I was doing, but I had never felt more free in my entire life before. I had like $6,000 worth of savings and an idea. Yeah. And that was in August of 2017. Oh, wow. And, now we are here in 2026 and on this bookshelf behind me, you can't really see it, but like there's a card on that picture. And that's the permission slip. Nice. That it just sits there. It's like the card that I always look to because I just had to give myself permission and I jumped and I haven't looked back since. I left the corporate career and the corporate grind and we've been focused on creating an alternative path for health for the millions of Americans that are looking for that solution, but have been conditioned to believe that cannabis is something that it's truly not. And that's what we do at Cured every single day.
I love that, man. And there's so many things I want to say and I want to ask you. In fact, my grandma is on CBD now, so your products are helping my grandmother deal with pain. She fell and broke her back and cracked her skull, all these things. And she was on pain meds. I go, Grandma, would you try something if I sent it to you? It's, CBD. And I think she actually did. She's 93 and I think she went, wait, like marijuana? Hell, no, that's bad, And I go, Grandma, I said, the government told you it was bad. They told you it was a drug. And it's a plant and it was made by God, if you will, like if you want to go there, right? Like it comes from the earth versus the things that are chemically made in a lab that have worse side effects than the benefits. In fact, I want to take a minute. I don't know. I might've shared this story with you last time we spoke. I don't remember. But I want to share this with my audience because if anybody listening trusts me and they're just getting to know you, like I want to bridge this gap. So when I had cancer, one day a nurse intended to stick chemotherapy in my spine with a big, thick needle. That alone was like, I'm like, this is, what have I got myself? Okay. It's like, this is what we got. We're here. Okay. So she attempts to stick chemotherapy in my spine and she misses my spine and injects it into my nerve. And next, I think it was 11 days. I'd have to ask my dad. I was so out of it. I don't remember if it was 9 or 11. It was somewhere in that range. I had the most horrific migraines 24 hours a day, every single day, did not stop. And I grew up with migraines. So I've had migraines. I've never had migraines like this, and they were nonstop. Usually I have it for the day, sleep it off. And they tried morphine, They tried Oxycontin. They tried every hardcore pain med, and not even morphine. Nothing worked. And then they finally kicked me out of the hospital because they needed my bed for the next patient. And I was like, I've got earplugs in, and my dad's like pushing me in a wheelchair, and we go back to this apartment by the hospital, and my poor dad is watching his son. I'm on chemo, I'm bald, I'm skinny, I'm on death's doorway, and now I can't eat, I can't stomach food. So he's watching, I'm already on death's doorway, and I can't eat. And he's like trying to get me to eat things, and he's bringing me things, and I'm telling him, like, Dad, don't even talk to me. I can't. It hurts so bad when you talk to me. And one day he says, Hal, what about that marijuana that your friend dropped off when you first started this cancer journey? Do you want to try that? And like something inside me, I go, and I hadn't done marijuana in years. And I said, yeah, let's try it. And so the funniest thing, my dad, it was flour. My dad's never put marijuana into a bowl. So he's like, how do I do this? And I'm like, I got one eye open on the bed. My earplugs are in, and I'm going, okay, Dad, just fill it to the top, And I get a lighter. I take 2 hits of marijuana. Again, in my mind, not a drug, a plant that grows in the ground. To me, it's so important to shift that paradigm in people's mind. We were told it was a drug. Cocaine's a drug. Heroin's a drug. Marijuana's a drug. It's like, well, no. Some of these are made in the lab. One of them grows out of the ground, right? So anyway, I take 2 hits of marijuana, and my dad leaves. And keep in mind, my wife had not talked to me in 11 days because I couldn't bear to hear sound or see light. So all she's getting is these updates from my dad, and she's calling my dad. How's Hal doing? And she's distraught, crying. My dad, we're all a mess. And 2 puffs of marijuana, and my dad closes the door, and white noise is on, earplugs in, he leaves. 5 minutes later, I open my eyes, I sit up straight, my headache is virtually gone, I have an appetite, I feel fine, and I take out my earplugs, I walk out in the living room, I go, Dad, I'm starving. And he, like, the look on his face, he goes, what? Like, you haven't been able to move in 11 days. How are you? Like, his brain couldn't even comprehend. I go, that marijuana you gave me, it's a freaking miracle. It's a miracle. And I pick up the phone. I call my wife. I go, hey, sweetie. She goes, what, how are you talking right now? I go, I took 2 hits of marijuana, and I feel 5 minutes later, I feel fine. And simultaneously, Joe, and I know you can relate to this at some level, very quickly that day, I felt very angry with with our medical system, that I was two puffs away, right? And for someone that doesn't want to smoke marijuana, which I don't smoke it anymore, it's like I take mostly CBD, very small THC, right? And it's like through Cured Nutrition, it's through either gummies or capsules or oil or whatever. But anyway, regardless, I was so angry that I go, man, you're pumping me full of all these chemicals that are just destroying my liver. And you're doing that with millions of people across the country, when I was 2 hits away from a plant that grows in the ground that has little or no side effects in that small of a dose from complete relief. So it was both a miracle and I never went down that road, but I actually thought, man, maybe this is my path. Maybe being an advocate for cannabis is and maybe someday that will be my path. And indirectly, as someone who really supports Cured Nutrition, I use your products every day, and you guys sponsor the podcast. That's like my indirect way of supporting the cannabis movement, man. But yeah, any thoughts?
That's such an incredible. That is such an incredible story. I think I don't think you told me that whole thing last time on how the chemo missed where it was supposed to be, which is what caused it. And that even adds to what you, like, literally what you just said. It's like, you take a full spectrum extract, cannabis, like, the side effects are you might sleep more. Yeah. And like, it's like, but like this other route, and like, of course, like modern medicine, like there's this there's this yes and like we need so much of it, right? Like my mom literally just now she is free of cancer in her body. Amen. But she had breast cancer and she had to get a double mastectomy, and I sat with her with every appointment with the oncologist, and the first thing that I got was like, "What are you?" I was like, "I want to be here to like help my mom through this process." But the first question I got was, "What are your qualifications?" I was like, I want to be here with my mom first
Yeah.
off, and
Yeah.
second, like I run a cannabis company and I know the properties of cannabinoids. I know how it can help my mom. And all I'm going to ask is, are you open to me helping my mom and her taking some of our products? And
Mm.
it was interesting how I was met, but I'll keep that as an aside.
Yeah.
But I couldn't agree with you more that there's like this visceral reaction to it, which is like not founded on anything that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And that's why it's become my mission. Like quite literally, that's why it become my mission to change this narrative, to allow so many people that are maybe like a couple steps away from interest in trying it, but have this fear that is founded on propaganda and a
Yeah.
narrative that it's existed for far too long, which has put, just like you said, marijuana in the DARE program and has classified it no differently than heroin. And just recently, there have been some shifts at the federal level where we've moved it from a Schedule 1 controlled substance to Schedule 3, now saying that it has medical benefits, but at Schedule 1, it was never considered that way. And so it's like, I pray about this all the time, Hal. I do believe that this is a part of the purpose that God has put on my life.
Yeah.
And I was really for some time questioning if that was true, because I was like, I'm very involved in my church and I started a small group and I was like, should I even disclose that I run this company? And I prayed about it a lot. And then I'm like, okay, maybe I should step away from this business. And then this hemp ban went through.
Mm.
And I've prayed about it every day. And God has showed me that this is part of the purpose that he's put on my life, and that this thing is from him. This plant is from him. This mission that I'm on and that we're on is necessary. And of course, it's going to be met with resistance.
Yeah.
Like, of course.
Yeah.
So every single day, like, I couldn't agree with you more. There's this deep, like, drive and energy that I have to help people, but you can only do it through stories like yours that help start to shift the perception that has been ingrained in so many people's heads.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start before we get to the hemp ban, which I want to talk about. Talk for those folks that aren't aware of what are the benefits of the cannabis plant and I know what's one important thing about Cure Nutrition is it's the whole spectrum, right? It's the whole plant. But talk about like CBD, for example. I have taken your night oil, the CBD night oil. This is a part of, like, I struggled with sleep for 6 months after I did 3 years of chemo. Something inside my brain snapped around November 2019. And for the next 6 months, I slept 2 to 4 hours a night. This is actually, I think, how I discovered Cure Nutrition, if I remember correctly. I tried every sleep supplement off Amazon. I tried everything, different combinations. I did research trying to figure out what can help me get through a night. And this was one of the main products. And I've taken this every night, I think, for the last 6 years, something along those lines. Your night oil. I like
incredible.
your new Dream gummies too, by the way. I just got
those are
but
those have CBN
in the benefits of CBD, CBN, THC, any other aspects of the plant. What are the differences? What are the benefits, etc.?
Yeah, so the best place to start is that there's over 100 known cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. We extract all of ours from the hemp plant, which used to be defined as having less than 0.3% THC. That definition was changed, which is what will lead us to another conversation.
Yeah.
But in full spectrum hemp extract, what you get is high doses of CBD, and then you can get lower doses of THC. You can get CBN, you can get several other cannabinoids, CBC, CBG. But to just zoom in on CBD, CBN, and THC, because those are the ones that we use the most. CBD is non-intoxicating. It has anti-inflammatory like properties, so you can use it over the course of time for recovery. And it also has an ability to help calm your body. It interacts with the GABA receptors in your body, which helps your mind calm down and helps you get to sleep. And if you just kept it there, like calm your mind, sleep, and then recovery, kind of take it like a vitamin where it helps your body achieve homeostasis and helps with your stress response. That's CBD, non-intoxicating. CBN is similar to CBD and lives kind of between THC and CBD. I'll go to THC real quick and then come back to CBN. THC is what is in typically what people associate with marijuana.
Yeah.
It is the intoxicating cannabinoid at certain concentrations. So at very low concentrations, it's actually not intoxicating, but it is the thing that gave you that instant relief. When you smoked it, it was THC. You got the instant relief. That's what a lot of people use for like pain and for quicker relaxation, quicker onsets. The problem, however, though, with THC is most people, if they've ever tried it for the first time, they go into a dispensary, they take a 5-10 milligram edible, and they're looking for calming properties. They get too much THC, they get anxious, they get turned off, and then they never come back. They're like, this is what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And that's been confirmed, and I don't want to try this ever again. For cured, we put about 1 milligram of THC in most products, which is 1/5 to 1/10 of a standard dose that you would get in a dispensary. It's non-intoxicating, but it gives you the more instantaneous relief. So that's like CBD and THC on 2 spectrums. And then CBN is more sedating. So I always explain CBN as like THC actually degrades into CBN. And so CBN is actually, it's a cannabinoid that when you take it, it almost feels like you have a weighted blanket over your body.
Yeah.
If you think about CBD kind of calming the mind, CBN would be more calming the body.
Interesting.
And when you get both of those in combination, it really helps your overall sleep, because if you ever, you wear your Whoop or your Aura, there's the deep sleep component and then there's the REM sleep. And I learned this from Dr. Mindy Pelz. She said, the deeper REM or the deeper deep sleep you get, the more REM sleep you typically get. So if we can get into deep sleep, then our overall sleep score and our overall recovery is going to be better. But to get into deep sleep, you really need the whole body to slow down. And so when people take CBN, they notice that their deep sleep score first gets better, and then their overall sleep score gets better. But you would never take CBN in the middle of the day because it is more sedating and more heavy. And it is closer to like almost the intoxicating realm. But it's so nuanced because all of these cannabinoids can show up in full spectrum hemp extract. And that's where like this greater conversation on like what is legal and where is this industry going to goes. But that's how I explain those 3. Do you want to zoom in on any of those a little bit?
No, that makes sense. I mean, I can just say, like if it's a weekend, if I want to really sleep deep and long and I don't have to wake up the next day, I'll do more night oil, and it keeps me asleep longer. I'll sleep like 8, even 9 hours. So I can really control with the dose. And like when I travel, I take the nightcaps, which are like, that's the perfect dose to sleep 7 hours for me. And then if I really want to go even deeper or longer or rest or recover, like after a hard day of workout or exercise or something. No, man, I think that's helpful. Let's talk about the ban. I mean, right now, your mission is at risk, right? Your mission is at risk. The plant that has helped me and millions and millions of people, the cannabis plant is at risk. The hemp plant's at risk. Talk about what's going on and what are you doing? Actually, before you do that, let me just say, if anybody wants to get Cured Nutrition, I grabbed all my products that I take off the shelf: Serenity gummies, Flow gummies, Rise Nootropic, on and on.
You got them all.
Go to curednutrition.com/Hal and use the code HAL at checkout. And again, I was a customer before y'all were a sponsor. I think it's important. Like, I do not take on sponsors unless I use a product. I love the product and I want to share it with folks. So again, curednutrition.com/Hal and use the discount code HAL for 20% off your order of that. Let's talk about the mission that you're on now to protect the mission that you feel God's given you.
Yeah. So we talked briefly about like marijuana and marijuana concentrations of THC, and those marijuana is sold state by state in dispensaries, and that's how it's controlled. And hemp and marijuana are both cannabis, but in 2014 it started, but then 2018 it really defined. The 2018 Farming Bill defined hemp as cannabis with less than 0.3% THC by dry weight. So it's essentially marijuana and hemp are both cannabis, but one has a much lower concentration of THC.
Yeah.
Marijuana is regulated state by state in dispensaries. And then hemp had the ability to be sold at the federal level as long as the concentrations of THC were meeting that 0.3% per serving. So what has happened, and this is wild and just shows you how frustrating it can be and how that visceral reaction is so founded. The bill that reopened the government in November 2025, there was a provision slipped into that bill at the very last minute that redefined hemp. So I just gave you the old definition of hemp.
Okay.
A provision was slipped into that bill that reopened the government. And, there's all this pressure to get the government back open. There's all this other language in the bill, but it changed it to less than 0.4 milligrams per container. So we have one of those bags in front of you has 60 gummies in it, and about a milligram per gummy. For that to be legal after November of this year, it has to have 0.4 milligrams of THC in it. Right now, we have essentially 120 times that much THC in it.
In the bag.
But when you take in the bag.
Wow.
So there is in one gummy, 1 milligram of THC, which is not enough to get you high.
Yeah.
It is enough to get you relaxation and relief. But it was basically just the definition of hemp was just changed, literally, to reopen the government. And so now, when that happened, it created a ticking time bomb, which is basically in 365 days from when the bill that opened the government was signed, saying that hemp is essentially banned. There can be essentially zero THC in any hemp product. The problem is that is quite literally impossible. Because the hemp farmer, when the hemp farmer is growing the hemp plant, THC is going to show up in it at very low concentrations.
Got it.
And then as soon as you go to extract the extract from the plant to get CBD, they're not saying that CBD is illegal, but they're saying that any concentration of THC is essentially illegal. As soon as you extract the cannabinoids from the hemp plant, it is going to have THC concentration in it, and it is now deemed illegal.
Okay.
So right now what's happening is basically 95% of the products that are in the industry that are being sold online become illegal in November of this year. And the full spectrum hemp industry, I should say it that way, the full spectrum hemp industry is dead unless something changes.
Wow.
Now, the problem is that in 2018, when that bill went through in the Farm Bill, it opened up this ability for things to happen, which you mentioned before we started the podcast. And if you live in Texas and several places, you'll see this happening.
Yeah.
You can walk into a gas station and you can buy a 20 milligram edible of something called Delta 8 THC, which is synthetic and is not naturally occurring THC. You can also get Delta 9 at 20 milligrams. That is a serious problem because a kid could walk into a gas station and buy it and they could be high as a kite. And that was never intended to be our mission at Cured ever. But there are so many companies that have basically exposed the ability to do that and are now essentially becoming marijuana operators without any rules. So they're selling high dose edibles online. They're selling them in gas stations.
With who knows what and crap. Yeah, all sorts of crap.
No supply chain, third-party testing rules, nothing. So you could literally have heavy metals, pesticides, everything showing up these. And it is a serious problem. So we're faced, and then like the other component of this, which is actually probably a really important thing to talk about, is that over the last 4 years, alcohol sales are down $840 billion.
Interesting.
And people are using low dose THC products as an alternative for alcohol.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things happening right now. The bourbon industry is lobbying hard against the hemp industry.
Wow.
The marijuana industry is lobbying hard against the hemp industry because they have been regulated state by state and sold products in dispensaries, which is where those high dose products should go. And I
Yeah.
completely agree with.
Yeah.
But they've been paying taxes at the state level at a absorbent amount. But the operators that are basically like, oh, we can do the same thing online, basically exposed a loophole in like the tax component of all of this. So there's like infighting in the cannabis industry, which is a problem. Then there's the bourbon industry that's lobbying against the hemp industry. And then there's the hemp operators like myself that have sold low dose THC full spectrum products that are non-intoxicating, that are intended to get people relief and relaxation without getting high. But we got swept up in this whole thing because we're not being treated any differently than the companies that are selling these high dose edibles online and, you know, in the gas station. And so like, the problem is very complicated.
Yeah.
And if we don't do something within the next 11 months up into November, our business is gone. So we have started a public advocacy group. It's a 501c4 called the National Coalition for Responsible Cannabinoid Access. And our mission is to go to DC and present a framework that is viable, non-intoxicating, protects children, has clear testing regulations, and creates a viable future for the full spectrum hemp industry, which is where we live. But it is a long road ahead of us.
Yeah. Are you and did you co-found this advocacy group, or is this something you started yourself?
Yeah, I started it myself. I'm the chair. I didn't know I was getting into politics in November of last year. And now I also run a nonprofit, which is separate from Cured, but it's on the same mission. Like companies that operate like Cured, we're inviting all of them to join us because we're all being threatened and we all have a mission to help people. And I've met a lot of the operators that operate their business just like us. And we're like, yeah, this is frustrating because like we can agree with so many components of like the synthetic cannabinoids, the high dose edibles that are in gas stations, like that has to go away.
Yeah.
It's not how this should work. But like, is the answer to make all of it go away? Or is it the answer to create a real framework that's saying, okay, as long as it's non-intoxicating, yes, it could be sold online. As long as it has childproof packaging, yes, it could be sold online. So yes, I started it, and it is a mission of ours at Cured to obviously support this public advocacy group because we run both. But we will take this public advocacy group to Washington, D.C. within the next several months here.
Yeah, well, I was telling you before we started recording, right, that it reminded me of Vani Hari, the food babe, known as the food babe online, and how she all of a sudden went from being an entrepreneur with True Vani that had a very, it's a line of health products that don't have any pesticides or dyes or any toxins in them. And she was successful. And I feel like that's where my energy is right now for you, man, is that you're going to make a huge impact, make a difference. I love what you said about how, when you pray about this, you get this, hey, this is your mission, and it's going to come with resistance, right? Like that's part of most meaningful missions. You've got to overcome challenges and adversity along the way. And Joe, I believe you're the person to do that, man. Like just hearing your heart and that you use these products to help your mom with her cancer journey, which I can so relate to that as someone who did the same on my own journey. Yeah, man, thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you for, having me here. And I remember the first time we talked and you shared a bit of the story that you shared earlier. I'm like, man, like that's what it takes. We have to hear those use cases, because here's what's being threatened. Millions and millions of Americans that rely on low dose THC products are going to lose access to something that is helping their, not just like to have a livelihood, but like their life. Because like, first off, it's going to allow them to move through the day, to sleep, whatever, and then allow them to work. So like we put this out to our community, and we said, we asked the question, like, what would losing access to low dose products, how would it impact your life? And man, like I got to tell you, like when I was reading through what people were saying, it was like I would have to result to pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
My quality of life would be gone. This, like, story after story after story after story. And it was just like, man, like, I got the chills because I was like, that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
And man, like, it just feels like, it feels scary and it feels big because it feels like, exactly like you said, like, I know I'm going to be met with a lot of resistance, and I would have never expected myself to be like, okay, now I have to run a political movement.
Yeah.
And I have to do it quick.
Yeah.
But it does feel like my purpose, and I could have never imagined that it led to this point. But now, as I look back, I'm like, of course it did. Of
Yeah.
course it was going to
Yeah.
have to lead to something
Yeah.
to this. So that's our mission right now.
Man. Is there anything that folks watching can do to support right now? Or is this really just something that is beyond the average person, what they're going to do? And it's up to you and the other operators in your industry?
Yeah. So obviously, the more Cured can set the example of how we believe the companies in this industry should operate, the better. So we're aggressively growing our company right now, and we would love to support as many people as we can through our company. But ncrca.us is the URL to our public advocacy group. And on there's really two calls to actions. To one, share a testimonial, and two, if you feel so inclined, to donate $5, $10. Like, we're going to get as many people as we possibly can that represent Cured as part of the public advocacy group out to DC to create noise and really get the attention of the right politicians. Because the truth is, it's to no fault of their own, but they don't really understand the intricacy of the industry.
Sure.
And so what happens is, like, lobbying happens, bourbon comes in with a lot of money, and bam, cool, this can make it into the bill that reopens the government, and just boom. Like, and so we just have to create awareness. We have to get as loud as possible. So my ask would be to one, just like, share with as many people the products that can help people through a non-intoxicating path, and whether it's cured or not, like, that doesn't matter to me, really. What matters is that there's a future for this industry. And so we will be creating more noise around NCRCA. And if any type of product has impacted you in a way similar to the products that Cured have, if you're listening to this, I just ask you to share your story. And what we're doing through Cured and through the public advocacy group is sending out emails so you can contact your local politicians and congressmen and women, because the more noise we create, the more at every level the politicians will say, like, this is something that really needs to be considered and talked about. And that will help us at least get an extension. Because if we don't get an extension, I fear that, like, it could be a little bit chaotic towards the end of this year. And right now, the other piece of this is, like, the extension is what's going to support the farmers, because the farmers have to start putting their crops in the ground here in the next couple of months. And if they don't do that, the entire supply chain for the industry is just gone.
Well, that's interesting to think about how it trickles all the way back and how many people are affected. And my grandma's one of those, 93-year-old customers that so she was on all these pain meds, and I said, Grandma, have you thought about CBD? And that's when I had to explain that it was a part of the marijuana plant. She didn't know anything about it, and then she got, oh no, I don't know. And this was just a few months ago, and I sent it. I said, I'm going to send you a bag of these gummies. Try them and let me know if they help you. And because she was taking, I didn't know, but she's like, I take this pain medication every day, and I forgot what it was, but whatever it was, I'm like, oh, Grandma, you should cut back on that and see if you can find something natural. And now she, by taking which I think it's just your CBD oil, she cut her pain meds in half, which is wild.
Wow.
So immediately, like within the first month, she's like, I cut my pain medication in half because you said it's not healthy for me and this is better for me. And so, so that's like a real life example. And dude, I will come to Washington if you need somebody to speak and share that story I shared earlier. I will bring my grandma. Like, let's go, dude.
I will. I would love to enroll you, and I just want to thank you for allowing us to like, of course, like, you are so enrolled in this, but I still have to thank you, because, like, having the ability to share these stories on platforms like yours is going to help us. So, when you ask, like, what can we do? Like, just literally this message and creating this space and sharing your testimonial is the momentum that we need to make a change happen. And I'm confident we can do it. And I know we'll be met with resistance. We already are. But I see on the other end of this that I when I pray about this and I view the future, I see cured as the gold standard in the full spectrum hemp industry. And I believe that because you could just rip the curtains back, and I'm not afraid to share anything that we do, our supply chain, our testing, our everything, our formulations, how we believe this industry should be ran, which means our margins get compressed all the time because we move slower because we have to do those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just from me to you and everybody that listens to the podcast, just thank you, because we just got to get the message out there.
You got it, brother. Thank you. And everybody listening, again, Cured Nutrition. If you want to try the products, Serenity Gummies, Flow Gummies, Nightcaps, Rise. I mean, so many. I'm looking at all of them. And obviously you see if you're a fan of the show, I talk about Cured Nutrition every week on the podcast. So I appreciate you, Joe. Thank you so much, man. And let's not take 2 years for this. I'll have you back. Let's have you back next year after this is, the work you're doing has come to fruition, and we can celebrate together.
Thank you, Hal. I appreciate it.
You got it.